Hi, I'm Lawrence Delalio. Welcome to the exclusive England Rugby Supporters Club edition of the official History of English Rugby. I believe the immense support we had out in Australia went a long way towards helping us achieve our ultimate goal of winning the World Cup. Now I know it's been said before, but the immense support that you gave us really does inspire the team. So keep it up, we need you.
Hoisting on, and it's going to be a good try for Carlton with that hesitation.
Carling, Andrew, this is out, Guscott straight to Hodgkinson, Rory Underwood round the outside, he's skated home, it's Rory Underwood.
Well, we see a drop from Rob Andrew, he struck it well as Andrew, it's there!
It could be argued that at the start of the 21st century, English rugby is as healthy and as prosperous as at any period throughout its history. In the Zurich Premiership, we have arguably the strongest and the most competitive league in the world. Every week, top players from both the northern and southern hemispheres pit their skills and their strengths to determine the best club side in the country.
Good play by Wasps, danger now as they go through Stuart Abbott towards the Kenny Logan side of the field. Abbott slipped. Here they come again. Josh Lucy, it's as simple as that for Wasps. Really poor defending by Gloucester, and Wasps have hurt them again.
For the first time in recent history, the England side genuinely stands comparison with the giants of the Southern Hemisphere. And the annual autumn fixtures against the touring sides have proved the best gauge of the national team's improvement. But this new era of hope and confidence has not come easily. In many ways, the story of English rugby has been one of underachievement. Apart from a short golden period from 1910 through to 1928, and another brief flowering in the 50s, English rugby has had to wait until the era of Will Carling and Rob Andrew in the 90s to eventually find consistency. During the 1960s, 70s and 80s especially, the England team results were, to put it mildly, disappointing. As is well known, the game was invented and developed in our public schools. On top of that, England has more clubs and players than any other country, and probably more finance. So why then has the national team so consistently underperformed? Well, perhaps another way of approaching this question is in fact to ask why and how things seem to have turned a corner.
We can trace this sea change back to two important dates. Firstly, September 1987, when 1,200 English rugby clubs began playing league matches. And then August 1995, when the IRB announced that henceforth rugby would be a professional game.
Subsequent to the repeal of the amateur regulations, rugby will become an open game. There will be no prohibition on payment or the provision of other material benefit to any person involved in the game.
These two long overdue reforms have culminated in the present league structure, the Zurich Premiership. Before 1987, clubs played each other on an arbitrary basis. There was no more resting on the games than pride and a sense of tradition. The biggest games of the season were the Anglo-Welsh encounters that more often than not dated back to the 19th century. Under the new league system, the best played against the best. Standards improved and hence the national team benefited. With these guaranteed fixtures and the increased media interest and exposure, the selectors could have no excuses for not picking the best possible England 15. With rugby becoming more competitive and thus demanding a greater commitment from players and management, professionalism became inevitable. And with professionalism came greater fitness and a greater awareness of the importance of coaching and preparation. It has often been speculated how the modern rugby giants of the Zurich Premiership would have fared against the players at the turn of the century and vice versa. Obviously, the nature of the game has changed profoundly. As has been well documented, rugby football owes its conception to the pupils of rugby school. But prior to its evolution on the school playing field, rugby was essentially football, which itself evolved from other early activities. As far back as circa 30 BC, there are accounts of a game called harpastum, played by the ancient Romans and presumably introduced to Britain by their invading armies.
So that was the first time that football codes came over to Britain, and it fragmented and was played in different forms all around the country. It was basically a rabble of people fighting for a ball. During medieval times, a ball like this would have been used, leather encased with straw or hay or feathers inside it. Archery practice was felt to be very important for national defence, and from the 14th to 17th centuries, football and indeed most sports were actually banned because they were taking away people's attention from archery practice.
In pre-industrial Britain, there were traditional encounters between two villages where one team would endeavour to move the ball from one village or field to the next, with the inevitable jollity and injury. But the mass production of the Industrial Revolution demanded that the workforce move into work centres, into towns, and this kind of undisciplined mob mayhem was discouraged. In public schools, games served a different purpose, and adolescents' physical energy was channeled into organised activity. Rugby was violent and aggressive, but controlled. As all rugby aficionados are aware, it was claimed that rugby was instigated in 1823 when William Webb Ellis, a 16-year-old at rugby school, caught the ball and ran with it. But the truth is more elaborate.
In the 1870s, when rugby was exploding nationally, it was the first time that internationals were played. It was really growing as a sport. The old boys at rugby school decided to look into the history of their game and to find out where and when it started. And they asked all of the old boys from rugby school to write in, giving ideas and memories. And one boy mentioned, he was been a boy at the time, but he was now about 80 years old. And his memory might not have been 100%. He wrote back saying, "My brother can remember being at school with a chap called Webb Ellis who ran with the ball, but I'm not quite sure." And it was all a bit hazy. That was the only name they were given, and that's the reason that the Webb Ellis myth grew. In actual fact, the story is much more interesting. In the 1820s, 1830s, the students at rugby school, the boys, used to play football, as it was known. And they played a game of football which had its own rules, which were made up as they went along to an extent. After each game, we hear that the senior boys would actually stand to one side and discuss the game that had been played and decide the rules for the next day. So it was a very flexible game. And it's quite possible that during that period, running with the ball was tried. Jem Mackey, in the late 1830s, we know for a fact, did run with the ball in his hands, and he actually touched over the goal line, and he was probably the first person to score what we now know as a try. So if anything, he deserves credit for, it should be the Jem Mackey World Cup, not the Webb Ellis World Cup.
The headmaster at rugby school just after the Webb Ellis period was Thomas Arnold. Arnold is given credit for encouraging the idea of games, especially rugby, as part of his ethos of muscular Christianity, essentially looking after your fellow man, team spirit and a sound Christian upbringing. At the same time, however, other public schools had their own versions of rugby. Eton had the famous wall game, Winchester had their 6 and 6. But the rugby school version of football, as we know it, was picked up and imitated at other public schools, Marlborough, Cheltenham. These schools copied the form of the game as well. At rugby school, the players wore white, which is why the English international team wears white.
Also, to differentiate between the different houses as they played against each other at rugby school, they were awarded coloured caps for their house. And that, again, is where the idea of getting an international cap derives from. So many of the concepts and the ideas that are currently involved in rugby football derive from rugby school.
Once the rugby boys left their school and went to university, they often found that other boys from other schools played under different rules. This problem had to be addressed.
A chap called Pell in the 1830s was trying to organise football games at Cambridge University, couldn't do so, found it very difficult because of all these different rules. Therefore in the 1840s, and then more successfully in the 1860s, he wrote a set of rules to be played as national football. These were taken, these Cambridge rules, at the first meeting of the Football Association, which was formed in 1863 in London. They took the Cambridge rules and said, this is the set of rules we're going to use to govern football nationally. At that meeting were representatives from numerous clubs, including Blackheath, who of course are a rugby club as we know them today. Blackheath weren't happy with a couple of aspects of the rules. Hacking and tripping, throttling, they really like to keep. We don't know why, but this is something, because actually they dropped them a couple of years later from their own rules, so it's a bit of a strange thing.
The Football Association were happy to keep running with the ball, but Blackheath were adamant that they wanted to keep hacking and tripping, which the FA didn't want. Blackheath walked out of the meeting. The Football Association were formed and they didn't allow running with the ball, as Blackheath had usurped that rule. If Blackheath had remained in the meeting, who knows what would have happened? Football or soccer might have included running with the ball in the hand, and the RFU, hypothetically, might not have been formed. Rugby might not have come about, perhaps. The rules and the vocabulary of rugby football tell us a lot about how the game has evolved. Why, for instance, are touchdowns called tries?
Initially, the players tried to score a goal from open play. You would kick into the posts from as far away as you could. As you progressed towards a post, sometimes you got to the goal line and you may have to go over the goal line, which made it very difficult to kick into the post, obviously. You would put the ball down, which would give you the opportunity to then try to score a goal. So in early days, in the first England match, 1871, England lost to Scotland by 1 try to 1 try and 1 goal, because we got the try but we missed the goal. So right up to the 1870s, this was the way of scoring.
On the 26th of January 1871, 32 representatives of 21 rugby clubs, including Blackheath, Harlequins and Richmond, met at the Pall Mall restaurant in Cockspur Street and founded the Rugby Football Union under President Algernon Rutter. Their remit was to govern the game, protect its best interests and, of course, field a national side. On the 27th of March of that same year at Rayburn Place, Edinburgh, England played Scotland in the first ever Rugby International. 10 of England's 20 players were former pupils of rugby school, including Frederick Stokes of Blackheath. A weakened England side lost to a better prepared Scottish team by a try and a goal to 1 try. It wasn't until 1875 that the 15-a-side format was adopted at the universities, and another 2 years before it was seen in an international against Ireland. This was 2 years after England had played their first international against the Irish at the Oval in 1875. In these early days, rugby was very much a kicking as opposed to a passing game. Indeed, it was sometimes considered poor form to offload the ball before being tackled. A few elite teams dominated. When the leading Welsh team, Newport, first challenged Blackheath at Rodney Parade on the 20th of November 1879, they were annihilated. 4 goals and 8 tries to 0. This Blackheath side included 11 England internationals, including the England captain Lenny Stokes, as well as Arthur Budd and Harry Vassell. In 1879, England and Scotland played their 9th international. This time they competed for the Calcutta Cup, a magnificent trophy donated by members of the defunct Calcutta Football Club. The Welsh were humiliated again when their international 15 met the English in their debut international in 1881. This English 15, unbeaten since 1877, scored 6 tries and 7 goals and a drop goal to 0. 1883 was the first official championship won by England, although 1884 was the first year all 4 countries played each other in one season. Despite falling out and not playing each other in 1888 and 1889, England and Scotland shared the first 9 championships until Wales won in 1893. Blackheath players continued to star for England, most notably Andrew Stoddart, who won 10 caps in the 3 quarters for England and went on to take over the captaincy of the British Lions maiden tour in Australia in 1888. The Blackheath side of this era also included Percy Cartmel, who instigated the famous Barbarians Club in 1890. Cartmel is seen here along with Captain A.E. Stoddart in a Barbar side against Devonshire in 1891. The nature of the game was changing. Harry Vassall of Oxford University and Blackheath applied a tactical passing game around 1884, but the most significant change came in Wales with the introduction of the 4-3/4 system, pioneered ironically by an Englishman, Frank Hancock at Cardiff. Despite this Welsh innovation, the English team had their greatest season to date in 1892, when they won the championship without conceding a point, culminating in a 5-0 victory in Edinburgh. But dark clouds were gathering. The game at this time was very popular in the north, with the working man from the mill and the factory.
For example, the Yorkshire Cup in its early years used to attract more people to watch it, more spectators, than the FA Cup in that time, and also England games played in the south of England at Rugby Union. So you can see there, that was the hotbed of the game. Now, to an extent, the RFU, who are London-centric and based in the south, felt a certain, not disgust, but they didn't feel comfortable with the rise of the game in the north, because the working class man had more of a need for excitement and victory at all costs and local rivalries, whereas the game as they saw it in the south was more about the Arnold version of the game, muscular Christianity, bettering yourself, good sportsmanship. Victory wasn't to be won at all costs, it was about looking after your fellow man. And they felt there was a certain antagonism between the two codes. This came to a head when it was established in the north, especially with the working man, who had to take time off work on a Saturday to play the game. He was asking his clubs in the north for broken time payment, which meant payment in lieu of hours lost from not being in his factory.
Back in 1893, the Yorkshire Union's request for players to be compensated for broken time caused the first of many rucks off the field. And as they did at the end of the 20th century, the first rulers of the RFU allowed this dispute to rumble on for some time, until in 1895, at a meeting at the George Hotel, Huddersfield, 20 clubs from Yorkshire, Lancashire and Cheshire broke away to form the Northern Union. That Northern Union became Rugby League. This split was to prove extremely damaging to English rugby. The northern clubs took with them the cream of the English side, especially in the forwards. In the next 12 seasons, they won only 10 of 40 games. The Welsh and Scottish team in particular took advantage of the slump in English fortunes. Only the fledgling French team were beaten with any consistency. In 1905, the famous All Blacks Originals inflicted a 5-try beating on England. But interestingly, Captain Dave Gallagher said that all his players felt that England had a far better team available than the one that was chosen to play. But there were better times ahead. In 1907, a rugby ground was purchased, 10 acres of market garden in the London suburb of Twickenham. This became the headquarters of English rugby and eventually the towering structure we know today. The first game at Twickenham on the 2nd of October 1909 featured Harlequins in Richmond. Quins won 14-10. The Harlequins team included several of the great players of that era. Daniel Lambert, who scored 5 tries on his England debut against France in 1907. John Burkett, who scored the first of his 10 international tries in that same game against the French. And, most important of all, Adrian Stoupe. Stoupe captained the England team in the first international at Twickenham against Wales in 1910. England won 11-6, the first English victory over the Welsh since 1898. Stoupe made his England debut in 1905 and was the first player to clearly define the scrum and fly-half positions, as well as developing the passing game instigated with the Welsh 4-3/4 system. Such was his influence that Harlequins named their new stadium in his honour, Stoupe Memorial Ground. Another star of that Harlequins 15 in England was Ronnie Poulton, later to become Poulton Palmer. Educated at rugby school, Poulton was equally adept on the wing or in the centre. In 1912, England lost out in the championship in Scotland, and in the first game of 1913 lost to the powerful Springbok touring team 9-3, despite a superb try by Poulton Palmer. This game also saw debuts for the fly half Dave Davis and the legendary try scorer Cyril Lowe. 1913 and 1914 were good years for English rugby. They achieved a first Grand Slam in 1913, followed by another the next year. The 1914 triumph included 1-point victories at home to Wales and famously away to Scotland when Cyril Lowe scored 9 of his team's points. The final match, a 39-13 victory in France, was to be the last championship international for 6 years.
When the war broke out, the rugby union decreed, and they sent a letter out to all clubs, that everybody was to join the army and that rugby was to cease. And so as a result, flocks of players joined up, and the amount of people lost was extreme. So there was a whole load who never came back, amongst them Poulton Palmer, of course. Poulton Palmer was the star three-quarter of England in those days, and he was killed in 1915 leading a raid.
Ronnie Poulton Palmer was only one of 111 rugby union internationals killed in the 14-18 war, 26 of them English. When England resumed international competition in 1920, only 4 of the pre-war side were included in the team: Cyril Lowe, Greenwood, Smart and Coverdale. But despite losing so many of their players, the 20s were to become a golden era for the English. Rugby was now seen as the fashionable game of the educated middle classes. More clubs were formed than in any other decade, and more people played the game than ever before. This popularity was reflected in the success of the national team. After sharing the championship in 1920, the team won its 3rd Grand Slam in 1921 with a brilliant halfback partnership of captain Dave Davis and Cyril Kershaw. But if anything, the team saw the foundation of arguably the greatest back row in English history: Tom Voice, Arthur Blackiston and Wavell Wakefield, seen here in the final match of that season, a 10-6 victory in Paris. Another illustrious figure making his second appearance in that match was Ronnie Cove-Smith, who would go on to play 29 times for his country and lead the side to the 1928 Grand Slam. But it was Wavell Wakefield, a rugby visionary, who more than anyone else shaped the nature of the game, especially forward play during that era. From his earliest days at Sebra School in 1916, Wakefield had strong ideas about the game. When he was made captain of the Cambridge University 15, he took over the selection process himself, and that Cambridge team devastated Oxford, the hot favourites. Wakefield introduced specialists in each of the 8 forwards, and as a result, the shape, size and capabilities of, say, prop and lock became more defined. He especially changed the nature of loose forward play.
He worked out that if the back row swung the scrum round to whichever side he wanted, then the back row would be in front of the three-quarters. Provided they had the ball, they could then move forward. And this is what they did. And there was nothing to stop them. All they had was 2 or 3 three-quarters who happened to be on that side, able to try and tackle them. And with the numbers they had, it was a piece of cake. And they won 2 Grand Slams that way. And it wasn't till later that they tightened the laws up to preclude the scrum moving more than 90 degrees, which it is now, and further that the back row had to hold on to the other players. They were quite free to break any time they wished.
After the triumphs of 1921, 1922 was a disappointment. Despite this victory in Dublin, England lost to Wales and could only draw with France at Twickenham. But in 1923, England cemented their 4th Grand Slam. Tough games against Wales and Scotland accompanied relatively easy victories against Ireland and France in the final game. The French game saw the final appearances of captain Dave Davis, Cyril Kershaw and Cyril Lowe. Bearing in mind the departure of these three great players, the 1924 Grand Slam was all the more laudable and certainly more decisive than the previous year. All the games were won by 8 points or more. The first game against Wales was their first victory in Swansea for 29 years. Cyril Lowe's replacement, Carsten Catchside, and the other new wing, Herbert Jacob, scored 3 tries between them as the Welsh were routed 17 points to 9. The next match against Ireland saw another brace of tries for Catchside. By adding scores against France and Scotland, Catchside became the first player to register a try in every match of the championship. Victory over Scotland gave England their 5th Grand Slam and meant they had now gone 11 games undefeated. The match also produced a rare try for Captain Wakefield. This side was surely one of the all-time great English 15s. But the ultimate test, even in those days, was the All Blacks. The 1924-25 All Blacks became known as Cliff Porter's Invincibles. They won every one of their 28 games, and in their Maori fullback George Napier, they possessed one of the great players of any age. Wakefield's England were known as a physical side, so the match was never going to be one for the faint-hearted. In the event, All Black Cyril Brownlee became the first player to be sent off in an international, allegedly for deliberately kicking an opponent. Even with 14 men, New Zealand were too strong for England, running out clear victors, 17 points to 11. This result suggested that this mighty England side might be past its best. In the next 5 nations in 1925, England only drew with Ireland and lost to Scotland 14 points to 11. Scotland succeeding England as champions. The next 2 years were a period of transition for this English team. During 1927, Wakefield was replaced by Leonard Corbett as captain. His back row allies, Voice and Blackiston, also retired. But in 1928, having already led the Lions in 1924, Ronnie Cove-Smith took over the captaincy. The opening match against the touring New South Wales team is often seen as England's first victory against Australia. This is debatable. Nevertheless, this match was a pointer to the rest of the season. Harlequins fly half 18-year-old Henry Laird scored, as did the veteran hooker Sam Tucker. If this side didn't possess the outstanding individuals of Stoops' teams or even those of Wavell Wakefield, they were still strong enough to record the Grand Slam, their 6th in 11 seasons. Their next will have to wait until 1957. The 30s were a moderate decade for the English side. They had some decent results, but they were inconsistent, failing to win 3 matches in a row until 1934. In 1930, they won the championship despite drawing with Scotland and losing to Ireland in Dublin. The highlight of the season was this team's 11-3 victory in Cardiff and 2 superb tries by Reeve and Robson in the victory against France. 1930 was also notable in English rugby history, as the captain of the Lions tour to Australasia that year was Doug Prentice of Leicester, the last Englishman to captain the Lions until Bill Beaumont 50 years later in 1980. 1931 was a particularly ignominious year, as England could only draw with Wales before being beaten by both Ireland and Scotland, and then in their last match losing to France for the first time in their history. This wasn't then perhaps the best time to welcome the South Africans on their 1932 tour.
It's 19 years since the last rugger team came over from South Africa, so we're glad to see them, and may they have great sport on their tour. Sitting on the left there is Tyndall, the full back. Next to him is J.C. van der Westhuizen, vice-captain. Then Benny Osler, the skipper. He seems rather shy. De Villiers and Craven, scrum halves, Van Merwe forward, and Venter wing three-quarter, who weighs 13 stone 8.
This was a forward-dominated side who went on to defeat all the home nations. Their skipper, Benny Osler, kept it tight and kicked for touch on all possible occasions. He is in fact credited with inventing attritional 10-man rugby, ironically a style later seen replicated by the 1974 Lions on their unbeaten tour of South Africa. Much of the inconsistency of the England side of this era was, as ever, blamed on the selectors.
Of course, the selection was ad hoc. You decided yourself. We had big selection committees who, as you're well aware, committees don't always agree. A player was selected. If he had a bad game, he was dropped. And someone else took his place. If he had a bad game, he was dropped. And perhaps the first one would come back again. And that's how it went on. They just played as individual. No coaching, nobody to tell them what to do, no game plan.
Due to arguments about professionalism, France were barred from the championship after the 1931 season and not reinstated until the first championship after the war in 1947. The position of top dog in Europe was undecided throughout the 30s as the championship continually changed hands between the four home nations. 1934, however, was a good year for the English, with victories in all three home internationals, commencing with a comfortable win against an inexperienced Welsh side at Cardiff.
Alas, the willpower of 50,000 spectators availed nothing to stem the determination and dash of the visitors, and Mickle goes over for an early try, which he fails to convert. Before half-time, Moore puts England further ahead with a fine try near the goalposts. It is England's day, and last year's Twickenham defeat is avenged.
Last week, Wales beat Scotland. Now England, in their white jerseys, carry the rugby argument a stage further, with a victory over the Irishmen in Dublin by 13 points to 3. Watch this movement. Cranmer in the English centre breaks through, passes to Elliott, who is brought down, but the ball has gone to an English forward, Fry, who goes over for a try.
Gerrard kicks off for England, and the annual struggle for the cup presented in 1879 by the disbanding Calcutta club is on. England's victory by 2 tries to 1 not only wins the trophy, but also the International Rugby Championship of the season. Owen Smith, England's fullback, plays a prominent saving game.
But if the 30s will be remembered for anything, it will be for the All Blacks tour of 1935-36.
The All Blacks are here again. British rugger teams, beware, they're after your blood. The famous New Zealand rugby team are in training at Newton Abbot, and our camera catches them showing exactly how forward movement should be done, while their manager, Mr. V.R. Meredith, looks on. On the right, the captain, J. Manchester. We wish him and his team the best of luck.
At Devonport, Devon and Cornwall white jerseys kick off in the opening match of the All Blacks tour. These All Blacks kept up their high-scoring reputation, but the counties had quite a lot of the game. Now for the All Blacks' first try. Gilbert, number 1, sends over King, number 21, near the posts. And so our visitors make a real flying start, and it seems it will take an extra good side to beat them.
In fact, the All Blacks lost twice before the England game. First at Swansea, 11 points to 3, and then in the Welsh International, 13-12. Next up, England.
Gerrard kicks off at Twickenham, where England beats New Zealand in the last match of the All Blacks tour by 13 points to 0. The first time that England has won. After 28 minutes of even play, Obolensky gets his first chance. Though half-tackled, he races away to beat ball, and rounding Gilbert, he touches down amid tremendous applause. Then the visitors fight back, but Longland is there to save from a kick ahead, and the steady and immaculate Owen Smith drives them back with some splendid touchline finding. Just on half-time, Cranmer breaks through and, helped by Candler, gives Obolensky his second chance. Slipping across from right to left, he gets New Zealand spread-eagled, and though Mitchell dives at him, over he goes again. Gilbert restarts, and shortly, Cranmer, getting the ball near the 25, drops a great goal. Cranmer is soon at it again, going through brilliantly, with Sever up to take the final pass and to race away from Reed for the last try. One last New Zealand rush, pulled up by Gadney, when King, one of their best forwards, gets hurt, and here is the victorious England team.
The match was Prince Obolensky's England debut, and by far his greatest match. He represented England on only 3 more occasions, without ever adding to those 2 famous tries.
England is playing in white. And standing in the middle is Obolensky, destined to play such a great part in this match. Many at first thought the All Blacks unbeatable, but their recent whacking by Wales have given England new hope.
That was a one-off. No one quite knows how. They played above themselves. Everybody played well on the day. And the following match, they didn't play at all well, but they played very well on that day, plus the fact that the Prince, Obolensky, was an unusual player. Prior to the international, he played for Oxford University against New Zealand and had run round their fullback and scored a try. When they came to Twickenham, he did precisely the same thing.
If the first try was a classic in the traditional manner, the second try was unique, a totally unexpected change of direction, catching the All Blacks completely unawares. If this match raised expectations, they were to be sadly dashed. In the next match, Obolensky's only contribution was 1 run that ended with him being smashed into the straw by the Welsh fullback Vivian Jenkins in a dour 0-0 draw. The 1936 championship went to Wales, but in 1937, England won the Triple Crown, winning the final match 6-3 against Scotland, their first ever victory at Murrayfield. In 1938, the British Lions lost a Test series 3-1 in South Africa. In the month they sailed home, Germany stood poised to invade Czechoslovakia. Once again, rugby was to pay a heavy price. England resumed Five Nations competition at the Arms Park in 1947, where England ran out 9-6 victors.
Naturally, there was intense excitement at Cardiff Arms Park, for the rugby match there was the first full international for 8 years. The Welshmen, fielding a strong 15 and aided by an early injury to Scott, were in English territory most of the time, but England opened the score with a try by White.
In the next match, they were hammered 22-0 in Ireland, but shared the championship with Wales due to victories over Scotland and France.
Then, within quarter of an hour of time, Bennett followed up hard to touch down like this. The try became a goal and England led 24.
England didn't win another championship until 1953. In fact, they finished bottom of the table in both 1948 and 1950. But there was an embryonic side developing and talented individuals. Don White and Lewis Cannell of Northampton.
Evans got a try.
Eric Evans of Sale. Ted Woodward of Wasps.
And presently England scored again when Woodward plunged over to make it 11-0.
This talent gelled in 1953, opening with an 8-3 victory in Wales.
3 points down, England worked away hard, and in less than 5 minutes they were rewarded. Regan began the movement and presently passed out to Beasley, who streaked towards the line. Then Beasley to Cannell, who was in the perfect position to dive over for a try. The kick wasn't too easy, but Hall brought it off.
Ireland denied them the ultimate prize that season, fighting back for a 9-9 draw in Dublin.
Ireland attacked strongly right from the start. But the English pack recovered, and Regan saw his chance and made an opening for Evans, who forced his way over the line for a try.
But if England possessed a truly outstanding individual in the 50s, that player might be Geoff Butterfield. He made his debut in the next match against France and made an immediate impression.
The teams were soon locked in mortal combat. Then France made a breakaway run, but a fumble gave Butterfield a chance to make a neat interception. Away he sped with Woodward alongside, and a pass sent the right wing over to open the score. The try wasn't converted, but England very soon added to their 3-point lead. A kick ahead was followed up at high speed by Evans, whose try, also unconverted, gave England a 6-point lead at half-time. Things looked pretty bad for France, and presently their captain, Jean-Prin, made a great effort to drop a goal and only just failed. Towards the end of the match, England went further ahead when Regan sent Butterfield away as a finish to a very nice movement. This time Hall converted to give England victory by 11 points to 0.
Butterfield scored again in the next match, a comfortable 26-8 victory to seal the championship. (1954) opened well for the English, Butterfield and Woodward proving too strong for the Welsh in a 9-6 victory.
England were 3 down, but now they launched a furious attack. Switching the movement to the right, Butterfield sent Woodward away on a 30-yard dash, which resulted in a try for England. The score was level at half-time, and the second period opened with a resolute attack by England. Now Regan to Quinn, Quinn to Woodward, and over he goes again for a second try. And it was Wynne who finally dived over to give victory to England.
Next up, the All Blacks, and once again, when it came to the big challenge, England were found wanting, going down 5-0.
The All Blacks indeed were going very strong in the early phases of the match. After about 20 minutes, they drove forward with great determination and succeeded in scoring a try far out through Dalzell. It was a difficult kick, but Scott was in form and it was clearly a goal all the way.
After the New Zealand game, they faced the Irish at Twickenham, and in a far more open game, the English won 14 points to 7.
Within 5 minutes, a pass from Davies sent Regan racing down the wing for a try. Conversion failed, but England was soon to add 3 points to their opening score. It happened on the other wing, and this time the pass came from Woodward to Butterfield, who dashed over.
England shared the championship in 1954 with France and Wales after losing 11-3 in Paris. Both 1955 and 56 were disappointing seasons. England's only win in 55 came in the Calcutta Cup match at Twickenham, 9 points to 6.
They were after the Triple Crown as well as the Calcutta Cup. When England were penalised, Cameron scored with a drop kick, unusual but highly successful. England was still leading, however, and they continued to take the initiative. After half an hour's play, a Davies-Butterfield-Sykes effort resulted in a try by Beer.
The 1955 Lions went on to draw the series in South Africa, 2 games apiece. They are fondly remembered by South Africans, however, as the most attractive free-running side ever to visit their shores. Dickie Jeeps, the tough Northampton scrum half, partnered Cliff Morgan of Wales in all 4 tests, and this before he had made his England debut. There was also an English pairing at centre, Phil Davis and Jeff Butterfield, and Butterfield especially enjoyed playing on the hard pitches of Africa.
Only 2 minutes left before half-time. Butterfield has it. He dummies and puts in a brilliant run to score between the posts, a magnificent try.
Although England lost twice in the championship in 1956, a great side was emerging. Jeeps came into the team, the languid winger Peter Jackson, and in the second row, the Oxbridge and Harlequins pairing of David Marks and John Curry, who went on to make 22 consecutive appearances as a partnership. English fans had a taste of things to come in their second match that year against Ireland.
In the second half, England went full steam ahead. First, a runaway try by Jackson. 6-0, and presently, after strong pressure near the Irish line, try number 2 was scored by Evans. From near touch, Curry kicked a fine goal. It was all England now, and only a few minutes later, a penalty kicked by Curry made it 14-0. One score was quickly followed by another, and the next was a try by Butterfield. A final penalty gave England victory by 20-0.
But the 1957 side under skipper Eric Evans were arguably the best English 15 since the days of Wayville-Wakefield. They began their campaign with a slightly fortunate 3-0 victory over Wales.
Now Thompson throws in, and Mr. Dickey, the ref, spots wing 3 Maddox offside and gives a penalty. Allison's kick, a simple job, gave England a 3-point lead, which they carried into the second half.
Against Ireland, a Peter Jackson solo effort ensured a 6-0 victory.
Nearing half-time, Jackson seized his chance and cut through for a brilliant try.
France were easily overcome with 2 more Jackson tries in the corner and an opportunist try for Eric Evans. Final score, 11-5.
And the championship. We began with a try early on. A fine movement completed by Jackson. Just before half-time, Jackson did it again. There he goes, veering to the right to fling himself across by the corner flag. But England's third clinched the deal thanks to Evans. Get ready, Scotland, you're next.
Before the start, both teams, England in white, were presented to His Royal Highness. Scotland kicked off, and the question was, could they deal with the all-conquering English 15? It never really looked like it, though they held out for nearly 40 minutes. Then Butterfield, intercepting brilliantly, went for the line at the gallop. Davies was there for the finishing touchdown. Half-time, and England, leading by an unconverted try, lunged forward in a series of attacks all over the field. It was enterprising rugger, and the Scots, fighting a dour battle, were right up against it. Then a penalty against them. Chalice took the kick, and England were 6 points ahead. With 10 minutes to go, good work by Higgins sent Thompson crashing over. From a steep angle, Chalice converted. The Cup, the Triple Crown, the Championship and a win over all 4 countries. Such was England's triumph when Higgins cut right through on his own. Chalice neatly completed England's Grand Slam.
More or less the same side drew 3-3 with Wales in 1958.
Proved an effective defence, till suddenly a pass sent Butterfield away on a cut-through. Robbins was up there to take his pass, then a long one out to Thompson, who dived over for England's first try against Wales since 1954.
In their next match, they recorded their first victory over a full Australian 15 in one of the most uncompromising games of the century. 2 more victories followed over Ireland and France, 2 tries by England's other prolific try scorer of that era, winger Peter Thompson, and one of the great breakaway tries by Peter Jackson ensured victory.
And after 20 minutes, Bartlett's kick ahead is taken by Butterfield, who sends Thompson galloping over. 5-0. And presently, Phillips sends out a long pass to Thompson, who tears away to dive over by the flag. And France now 1 short through injury. England's third try, which with a second-half penalty made the final score 14-0, was a fine effort by Jackson. A great English victory, and France's worst defeat for years.
After the last game of the season, a draw with Scotland, Eric Evans, probably one of England's greatest hookers, retired after 30 appearances. Jeff Butterfield took over the captaincy in 1959, a year in which France took the championship. In a mediocre season, new faces included Bev Risman, who along with Peter Jackson was to play so enterprisingly on the Lions Tour of New Zealand in 1959.
O'Reilly has the ball, he's streaking away, he throws a one-hander to Scotland, they'll never stop now. Jackson has it, he beats McPhail, he beats Urban, Colton won't stop him and he's scored in the corner. Magnificent try that brings the score to 3-3 and the time is running out in the first half. Slow motion now shows Risman at his best. Mulligan sends him the ball. He moves round on the blind side, dodging Meads. He's racing up the line now and they can't stop him. He sidesteps McPhail. Pickering can't catch him. Don Clark will be too late and Risman has...
New faces in 1960 under new captain Dickie Jeeps included Richard Sharp and Mike Weston and the kicking fullback Don Rutherford. All featured prominently in the 14-6 demolition of the Welsh.
But there soon was evidence as Jim Roberts raced away for a try between the posts. Rutherford took the kick, 8-0. It's a long time since the Twickenham crowd saw Wales in such eclipse, but the score continued to mount against them. Another penalty by Rutherford. Considerable credit for English tactics goes to fly-half Richard Sharp. It was he who started the movement leading to Roberts' second try. Yes, it was 14...
Victories over Ireland 8-5 and Scotland 21-12 guaranteed the Triple Crown, their last for 20 years.
It was in one of these that a pass from Jeeps gave Sharp the chance of dropping a beautiful goal. 3-5. England kept it up. They now had completely stolen the picture, but it wasn't until very near the end that Phillips sent Marks plunging over for a try. England won 8-5. Terrific shocks jolted the Scots. In 5 minutes, Richard Sharp's magnificent drop goal from far out put England ahead. Bad enough from the Scottish point of view, but in the course of the next 7 minutes, they found themselves 8 points down after England had scored a try and converted it. It was all England, and Jim Roberts was soon flashing to the line for England's second try. Don Rutherford converted with a great kick. The match was only about 20 minutes old when Rutherford notched the 50-yard penalty. 16-0. Scotland, being Scotland, were still undismayed. A sizzling run by Malcolm Phillips, a perfect pass to John Young, and nothing can stop him. A steep angle for conversion, but Rutherford converts. 21-9, and clearly England's...
A draw in France denied England a Grand Slam, and it was France who won the championship for the next 2 years.
3 minutes after kick-off, Sharp took a pass.
One source of encouragement for the England team was in the outstanding form of Richard Sharp, as in this 1962 trouncing of Ireland.
Sharp himself converted to give England the lead 5 points to 0. Undoubtedly, the man of the match was Sharp, number 10. His sure handling and long stride were a delight to watch whenever England attacked. There were still plenty of spirited exchanges, but nothing could stop England or Sharp. He capped his great display by racing through for the final try. When he converted, he'd scored 10 out of England's 16 points.
In 1963, Peter Jackson was recalled to the side to face Wales. The effect was immediate. England's first victory in Cardiff since 1957.
But the youthful English pack not only weathered the storm, they pulled a real beauty out of the bag to finish the first half. It came from a throw-in. One of those fantastic throws by Roberts. Phillips and Weston took it on to Jackson. He combined beautifully with Phillips, who raced ahead to touchdown. Sharp's conversion put England 5 points up at half-time. Over by the Welsh 25, sharpshooter Sharp took an almost leisurely drop kick. 13 points to the visitors. England's victory was certain now, but give the Welsh their due, they finished with something of their first half fire. A line out by the corner flag. From the throw-in, Hayward bludgeoned over to make it 6 points to England's 13.
Arguably an even greater try than the Phillips team try was Richard Sharp's solo effort against Scotland, a 10-8 victory and the championship. This was to be England's last trophy until 1980. Unfortunately, England undertook a 3-match tour to New Zealand and Australia at the end of the 1963 season. They were beaten in all 3 games and again 14-0 by the All Blacks in the first game of 1964.
And after the changeover, the story was still the same, England scoring not a single point. The All Blacks' final try and conversion brought their total up to 14 points. England's biggest Twickenham defeat since the ground was opened in 1910.
The next 17 years were fairly grim ones for England. Of course, the selectors took most of the blame, that and inadequate preparation. But thankfully, even in this dark period, there were moments to savour. England's victory over France in 1965. Andy Hancock's extraordinary injury time equaliser against Scotland that same year.
And an exhausted fling across the line by Andrew Hancock. So it's a draw, but some consolation for Scotland, they still have the Calcutta Cup, which they won last year.
The less said about 1966, the better. In 1967, there was one great victory to enjoy. England recording their largest score since before the war, 28 points to Scotland's 14, and 2 tries for Colin McFadden.
Away for McFadden to score. Two minutes later, a copybook try. Finland and Hearn send McFadden on his way. 22 points. Hosen converts. 24 points. Finally, the drop goal that completed England's biggest ever score against Scotland. So England regain the Calcutta Cup. If they beat Wales, they'll take the Triple Crown as well.
Unfortunately, in the next match, Keith Jarrett and Wales put pay to England 34-21. The end of that season saw the visit of the great All Black side of 1967. Predictably, they defeated England 23 points to 11.
But he hasn't It's taken by Williams. Here's this Wellington flanker. Almost up to the England 25. McRae joining in, number 13, dribbling on. And this is Meads up there as well. Williams is there, number 6. And it's a try for Birtwistle. A sudden breakaway there. And Birtwistle has scored to put the New Zealanders ahead by 8 points to 0. And so they get the advantage this time of putting the ball into the scrummage. Gittings, nicely to Finland. Savage, all the way through to the 25. McFadden, out to Lloyd. Lloyd must score. A brilliant try for Lloyd. And there's Bob Lloyd in his first international, an England scorer.
As in every era, there were strong individuals. Budge Rogers, John Pullen, fullback Bob Hiller, and Keith Fielding, who scored perhaps one of the great tries in the shock result of the 1967 season, the 22-8 victory over Five Nations champions France at Twickenham.
Here's that fantastic run by Fielding, the scoring sprint superbly controlled right to the touchdown. Hiller converts. Then, in spite of the slight suspicion of a knock-on, a great try by Webb. And after a French drop goal, another penalty from Hiller completes England's highest score against France since before the First World War. Fall me down.
But perhaps the one all-time great of the late 60s, early 70s side was David Duckham. Along with John Spencer, Duckham brought much-needed pace and flair to England's backline, as witnessed in the 1969 Scotland match.
A high kick from Finland is neatly intercepted by Dave Duckham. Sweeping out to the left, he completes the first of his 2 tries. Hiller's conversion was an object lesson to Scotland. Dave Duckham is obviously here to stay. In the second half, a pass from Dalton gave him his second scoring chance.
But it was in the 1969 rugby season that this game for the first time gave second best to politics with the visit of the Springboks.
Demonstrators faced a cordon of security staff as they prepared to greet the incoming Springbok rugby touring team from South Africa. The apartheid policy of South Africa includes all forms of sport, preventing black and white from playing together. The Springboks captain commented that they'd come to play rugby and not worry about politics. A spokesman for the demonstrators said he was sure that the South Africans knew they were going to be hounded everywhere they went. 25 matches are scheduled for the tour. The Springboks' first venue had been kept secret until the last minute, but when they arrived to play Oxford University, the demonstrators were ready. The teams ran out to a mixed response. Cheers from the rugby enthusiasts, boos and whistles from the demonstrators. But a line of 200 policemen, plus a steel fence, prevented any active interruptions. The game got underway. Oxford were beginning to pile on the pressure, and the South Africans were looking harassed. The famed Springboks were in trouble. Scrum time again, on and off the field. Now Oxford were going all out. Again, Heel kicked an easy goal. 6-3 to Oxford. The one demonstrator who managed to get on the pitch didn't fool anyone. As the second half got underway, it was obvious this was Oxford's game. The mighty Springboks were on the run. The day was Oxford, but the tour continued.
The Springboks were followed by demonstrators at all their games. Understandably, it seemed to have a detrimental effect on their form. Prior to their game with England, they had already lost 6-3 to Scotland.
Inside to Scarlett Smith, over the 25. This is Bucknell. A great move by England. Larter to Fairbrother. Larter must score. 8 points to 6, South Africa lead. 2 yards from the Springboks line. Larter beaten to it there by Devet. It's a try for England. The ball going loose. John Pullen picks up and goes over to score with Bob Taylor alongside it. Bob Taylor with the conversion attempt. Bob Hiller then.
Final score 11-8. It was probably only in the final part of the tour that the Springboks showed their true form. They drew with Wales and went on to beat the Barbars, despite scintillating performances from the England pairing of Duckham and Spencer.
Gareth Edwards using the narrow side, out to Duckham. My goodness, can't he move? Duckham inside H.O. de Villiers. This could be one of the tries of the season. Stuart Gallagher got up well there. Edwards to John, Gibson, Spencer, Williams in the line. Spencer is through to the 25. There must be a chance for Alan Duggan. This is Duggan. What a score.
1971 centenary year saw more disappointment for England. They lost twice to Scotland, once in the Five Nations and once in a celebration match.
England's flanker, Tony Neary, takes an inside pass and scores a try to put England 4 points ahead.
England were also predictably outclassed by World Presidents 15, 28 points to 11.
Rugby Union, the game which was born in England, is 100 years old this season, and the Queen was at Twickenham to commemorate the centenary. The anniversary match was a battle of the giants, England versus the Overseas 15, a team drawn from the world's foremost rugby players.
1971 is an important date in the hearts and minds of British rugby fans because of the Lions Tour of New Zealand. But that was, of course, a side based on the strong Welsh teams, although England's captain, John Pullen, played in all 4 tests, and Peter Dixon scored an important try in the last test. Winger David Duckham also played in 3 test matches and scored a record 6 tries in a midweek game. The 1972 Five Nations wasn't completed because of the political situation in Ireland. England still lost all 4 Five Nations games that they played, but rescued the year with an historic one-off match in South Africa under John Pullen. England came back from that tour and lost in their next game to New Zealand 9-0. This New Zealand team went on to play in one of the all-time great matches against the Barbars in 1973. The match turned out to be a perfect showcase for the talents of David Duckham, among others.
What a dummy! Fabulous tackle. Wilkinson covering by Karam. Quinnell. Edwards again. Into Quinn, into Slattery. Over the top. Goes! Brilliant! But it was forward. Edwards, Bennett, Dawes is with him, so too Duckham. Now Gibson's outside Duckham. These two between them have got pace. Kilpatrick's tackle on Duckham. Batty as well. Carmichael of Scotland. David of Wales. Pullen of England. Slattery of Ireland. Gibson of Ireland. That's his genius. That's now Willie John. Tom David of Wales. Joe Curran's tackle, and it went forward. And that by Lindsay Colling, a great piece of play, but Duckham can keep it in. David Duckham. Lambert misses him. Kilpatrick as well. Colling was in that again. Derek Quinnell, Dawes, Williams, Gibson. Slattery to John Williams.
In 1973, England lost their first 2 internationals against Wales and Ireland, but won against France and Scotland to share in an unprecedented 5-way tie.
Down at the centre. But England trying to move this ball now and stretch the French, which they do. Cooper. And that's Priest. Priest has got Duckham with him. Beautiful dummy. What a lovely break. This could be a try. Duckham will be in. Good ball from Smith. What a good pass. You saw that floating away. The high kick from Cooper. And the English went up so quickly. Fran Cotton, first English forward there. Here it is. Smith to Cooper. Cooper's got Evans with him. That's Evans on the sidestep. Up the middle. He's got support on all sides. 4 men. Can he go it alone? Stack Stevens to David Duckham. His second try of the game. David's second try of the match.
Colin Telfer restarts. Fed there from Ralston. Smith to Cooper. Cooper varying his play very astutely. Jeff Evans, a blistering burst by Evans. Now a chance for Duckham. Irvin coming across it, Shedden who has him. And eventually Steele puts him down. Cooper, a chance here for Priest. Driving on by Dixon. Referee's given the score. Steele to throw. Brown palms. That was an attempt by Peter Dixon to turn, and he's done it. This is Steve Smith. A lovely run here by Tony Neary into the Scottish 25. Cooper, there's an overlap here for Squires. Squires must score.
England toured to Fiji and New Zealand in August and September of 1973. They lost all 3 provincial games in New Zealand and were very much the underdogs against the All Blacks.
Webster. That's Neary. Ripley, the big 6'5" man. Webster, New Zealand 25. Squires scores. Here's the little man in action. Waiting is Watkins. This time Dugan has plenty of time. Landrum inside New Zealand's 25. Not in touch. Stevens. Ralston. Stevens again. That's a fine try to snack Stevens. Peter Rosborough. England in front. And now Ian Kirkpatrick. The problems belong to you. 2 points down, into the breeze, 30 minutes to play. Ralston, calming, Watkins for Webster. Landrum, messes it. There's Webster. Oh, he can't believe it. Neary, Tony Neary scores. Here's the replay. It came from a kick by Webster, which Landrum could not control in the breeze. First to it was Jan Webster. Set it up for Old, and Tony Neary it was. Tony Neary at 24 from Broughton Park. His 17th international today. He's never been dropped since playing his first 3 seasons ago. A throw being made by Watkins as Duckham goes back in defence. Ralston, one of the men of the match, pushing on. Here's Fran Cotton running like a back. Up to halfway. Kicks ahead. Drop out 25, but the whistle has gone. And England have beaten New Zealand by 16-10.
Yeah, it certainly was one of the great moments. I thought I'd never surpassed Ellis Park, but I think this is even better because we didn't have too good a record up until now. And I can't say thank you enough for the lads for what they did for me this afternoon. They really pulled out everything.
John, one of the great sights that New Zealanders will remember for a long time, Andy Ripley and Watkins and Neary, your loose forwards were quite magnificent today.
Yeah, I said before in the team talk, they were the lads who were going to win this match. And as it turned out, they did. They were magnificent.
Was that your team tactic for England to beat the All Blacks today, to the loose forwards to spoil the back play of the New Zealanders?
Basically, yeah, I think they were under the impression we were going to run it all the time, which we never really intended to do. The idea was for the back trio to get in amongst it and upset the rhythm of the All Blacks if we could.
John Pullen, thanks for coming to New Zealand and thanks for a great game today.
Incredibly, Pullen's team followed up this victory with another astonishing scoreline in their next international.
Alan Old, who played in both away victories against the Springboks and the All Blacks, playing today in his 7th international. Alan Old of Leicester and Yorkshire. starting the game for England. But in fact, it's Peter Rosborough who does a quick one, trying to make the Australians drop out. Russell Fairfax. Straight up to Rosborough on his own 10-yard line. The high up and under with Tony Shaw underneath it. That was a great catch under pressure. That's the Australian 25. The pick up there by Watkins. Steve Smith, the scrum half. A great chance for Peter Squires. And he's only 8 yards short of the Wallaby line. What a sizzling start to this match. It's the Australian 25. Throw in by Jeff McLean. Tapped there by Fay. A chance for England, and it could be a score. Breakaway forward, Tony Neary. Chris Carberry, the Australian hooker, of course, will be wondering whether to have a go at this ball or whether the Wallabies should use an 8-man shove. It's a great drive. It must be a score for Ripley. A pushover try. Andy Ripley, the scorer. Rosborough with the goal kick. A fourth successful goal kick for Peter Rosborough in his last 2 international matches for England. And so England stretch it out to 13 points to 0 with 6 minutes of the second half gone. The Australian 25. Watkins has broken to standoff. This is Watkins giving it to Ruffley. Determined bit of running by Ruffley. Watkins it was, and Tony Shaw who rescues it. A wonderful spirit this match has been played in as well. None of the tantrums that can mar international rugby. It really has been hard and robust, but with great sportsmanship out there. Another one against the head for John Pullen. Smith to Old. Alan Old. Can he get the ball down? Yes, he can. That undoubtedly is the clinching score. Gregory Pounds. Referee's whistle goes for the end of the match, and England have won by 20 points to 3, and in so doing they've completed a unique treble in the last 17 months with successive victories over the Springboks, over the All Blacks, and now over the Wallabies. What a moment for John Pullen, the English captain, in his 32nd international, captain of England. There he is down at the front, captain of England in all of those 3 great victories.
After these 2 stunning wins, England only managed 1 victory in the following season. But it was a good one, albeit controversial, against Wales, 16 points to 12.
It's John Pullen who captains the England side in a full international for the 12th time. Neary, Webster, Old, inside to Evans. Evans with a blistering pace. Utley's with him. What a great move. He gives it to Ralston. Ralston to Duckham. Duckham's going to score. What a try. David Duckham's 8th international try for England. Ripley charging and mixing the line. What a popular try that will be for Andy Ripley. Edwards to Phil Bennett, looking for his forwards. This is Llewellyn. Llewellyn of Swansea, out to Delmy Thomas, over halfway. J.J. Williams. J.J. Williams, and this could be a try. Williams and Squires. Can Duckham get there first, or is it Williams? Referee has awarded a 25, and the whole of Wales is up in arms. It was a tremendous race. Squires 14, Duckham, J.J. Williams. Well, J.J. seemed to know that he'd got a hand to it.
Of course, 1974 is famous once again for a triumphant Lions tour, this time to South Africa. Roger Utley and Fran Cotton were mainstays of the pack, but once again the team was based on players from the phenomenal Welsh side of that era.
But the Lions having the edge once again. Maloney breaks. Ripley up in support. That's Roger Utley. Utley to Ripley. Ripley busting as he did for London Counties. Tony Neary going for the corner. A dramatic last-second try for Tony Neary. Paul Bayful, the scrum half, replacing Harry Sonicus. This is second test of the series, Bayful's. Oh, and it's a wild pass from Bayful. And the try given to the Lions. And it's Roger Utley, the man with the touchdown.
From the 60s into the 70s, the dominant sides in the Five Nations were predominantly Welsh or French. The Welsh in particular seemed to produce world-class players as though off a conveyor belt.
John Williams, the fullback. JJ, this is John Williams now. Can John Williams score his third try against England? Yes, he can.
With Welsh and French sides playing hard, competitive matches week in, week out, it was inevitable that they would be better prepared for internationals than their English counterparts, where club games had little or no meaning.
In those days, of course, we didn't have leagues. It was, clubs played who they wanted, when they wanted, county championship and all that sort of stuff, which meant that it was a risk putting a player in because he wasn't put under the microscope week in, week out, and so it was always a bit of a risk, and then if you failed, you searched around for somebody else.
1975 and 6 were two more dreadful seasons, with a 3-match losing tour of Australia thrown in. But 1977 through to 1980 saw England improve to mid-table respectability.